Our affirmation this morning is, I have the courage to face discouragement. This week has been such a challenging week. These days we live in this world where we just get notified of everything right away, especially with the internet and television and the news cycles. And even this morning, maybe a lot of you have heard James Garner passed away. And then, there was another thing about another actor from another film who passed away, and Israelis fighting. And of course, earlier this week, there was that horrible missile attack on the airplane. So we know as we go through life, there are so many challenges, so many discouraging things, and they just come upon us every single day. And what we need to do is very important, is that to have courage to walk through all that. And a lot of times it takes a lot of digging inside us to get to that place, to be in that place where we do have the courage to face the discouraging things and the upsetting things and the challenging things in life, especially when we look at something like that airplane disaster, which is such a senseless loss of life. And I don't know if many of you have heard more of the news on that, but over 100 of the passengers on that plane were going to the 20th annual World AIDS Conference. So there were activists and scientists and physicians, just such a tremendous loss. And it just seems so senseless. And, a lot of times we just feel powerless because here we are, it's done, it's over there, what can you do? And it's hard to hold on to your courage and still have, faith in our common man and in the world to know that these things are going to go on. You may recall last week we talked about living in an orderly universe. And one of the things we talked about was, of course, running the mile that you're in. And sometimes that mile that you're in, you may want to look ahead because there are so many discouraging things. It seems very, very challenging to sit there and focus on that mile you're in. But a good analogy to this is, have you ever walked into your house, which is really dirty and dismayed, and you look out the window at your neighbor's house and it's really nice and clean? Well, no matter how long you look over at your neighbor's house, that's never going to get your house clean. The reality is you have to run that mile that you're in. You have to deal with these challenges as they come up. And, it can be something as simple as, chores you have to do around the house, or dealing with a loss, or, dealing with senseless tragedies. All these things that we go through, we need to find in us the courage. And as New Thought students, we know that we find this courage through prayer and through meditation. And, I don't know, I hope that I talk enough about that and really enforce the power of prayer. It is such a wonderful dynamic thing, because not only are you sending out these positive thoughts in the universe, you are sharing your needs, but it has such a calming, almost like a sedative power with us to calm us and keep us orderly, so that we can face our challenges and our circumstances and our situations in an orderly way. Because a lot of times, just like if your house is a disarray, if we find ourselves in a challenging situation, a lot of times our emotions get the best of us. And, we run around like a chicken with its head cut off, because it's hard to ground ourselves and get ourselves to that place where we're aligned with the Spirit. And we know, okay, this is how we walk through this circumstance or this situation. This is phase 1, phase 2. These are the things that I need to do to get through that. This is how you access the courage that you have inside of you, so that you can face the discouragements that happen in life. We do need to have the courage to walk through them. And we also need to be mindful, too, when we're walking through these discouraging things in life, to address them and then move on. Run that mile you're in, and then get to that next mile you're in. I think that I've mentioned a lot of times, Pastor Mike used to talk about a woman who would come in for some counseling, and she was just so bereft and beside herself because the husband had decided to up and leave her, and she was just so upset, and she couldn't believe how, let down and disappointed she was. And during the counseling session, the pastor had asked her, well, when did this happen? And she replied, well, it was about 20 years ago. And, of course, then you have to stand back and say, okay, I think there's a bigger issue here, because, there's one thing walking through your discouragement, but if you just hold on to it for the rest of your life, of course, that's pointless. It doesn't help you, and it doesn't help you grow, and it certainly doesn't help that circumstance or situation. I used to have to drive around a lot more for my work, and I'd listen to a lot of talk radio. A woman had called in, and she said, I don't know if you could help me. I don't know what to do. I need your help because I'm so sad. And it turned out that her husband and child had died in a car accident. And so Dr. Laura had asked, well, when did this happen? It was 2 days ago. And she just said, well, you know what? There's really nothing I can do because this is what happens. I mean, this is the human condition. You're grieving. This is grief. You're going to go through it. There's nothing I can do for you. So the reality is that we are going to come upon some discouraging things. And of course, we face them with courage. And there are times when we're just going to address things. It's the natural human condition of things. I mean, if we lose a loved one, that's a natural instinct, is to grieve. And there's nothing wrong with that. But don't hold on to it for 20 years and, not be able to live your life. So certainly part of having the courage to face these discouragements is to realize that we are all humans and we're all going to live the human condition and we're going to experience human emotions. And that's part of being courageous. Don't be like some of these people who, do all sorts of things, bury themselves in work when something happens that a normal person would grieve through and try to do everything to avoid dealing with the pain and the grief of what happened. That's part of the courage of going through your discouraging times, is knowing and understanding that these are the things that you have to do. You have to walk through them. So as you're going through the week, ask yourself this question: where do I turn in the face of discouragement? Where do I turn? Do you turn to prayer and meditation? Do you turn to the power and the divine relationship that you have with Spirit? Or do you take everything inside and you get upset and you find yourself so frenzied that you can't be in a place where you can align yourself with Spirit so that you can resolve any discouraging issues, where you can get through the issues of life and move on, run that mile, and then go on to the next mile? That's not to discount, of course, the grieving. Of course, when we lose a loved one, that's a very real, significant thing. However, we know, certainly as New Thought students, death is a part of living. And so we as New Thought students also know that when a person does transition, they go to the wonderful, wonderful, better place. And we know that one day we'll be there as well, and we'll reunite with people. And so the loss is usually dealing with us here because we grieve and we miss the loss of a person. And certainly a lot of great scientists and researchers who, had so much information about a particular subject who are now gone. I mean, that's a loss to this world that we live in. And any senseless death is a loss. But we have the courage to face these discouragements. So again, as you're walking through the week, ask yourself, where do I turn to in the face of discouragement? And make sure that you find yourself in the place where you're saying, you know what, no matter where that is or isn't been, I know the place that it needs to be is prayer and meditation. I know I need to turn to my relationship with the divine, with God, and that is going to instill in me all the courage I need to walk through every circumstance and every situation. And the good news is that regardless of what happens in our lives, the good news is that God's abundant grace is pouring over us. It's bathing our discouragement in the hope of divine promise. In the midst of our sorrow and suffering, in the midst of our happiness and our joy, in the midst of every experience of life, God shouts to us His love, embraces, and assures us that His divine presence is within us at that moment and always. So remember that. God's divine presence is with you at that moment and always. At your time of joy, at your time of need, when you need courage the most, even when you're in your happiest place, God and His divine presence is always, always with you. So remember that as you're walking through the week. Face all of your discouragements with great courage and know that God is with you, and that's your divine connection to walk through even the most challenging and darkest places.